increasingly significant idea, overwhelmingly significant idea, particularly among liberals, like, say, Bernani, that it is necessary to control people's minds because they're too much of a danger. We, as one of the leading, take a look at, say, the Encyclopedia of Social Sciences, and big encyclopedia in 1933, so this is still pre-Second World War. There's an entry, there actually is an entry on propaganda. Remember, propaganda was a usable term then. And the entry on propaganda is written by a very distinguished political scientist, liberal political scientist, Harold Lasswell, one of the founders of modern political science, in fact, of communications and so on. And it's worth reading. It's a page or two, Xerox it out and read it. He says, these are paraphrases, but they're pretty close to quotes. He says that we must not succumb to democratic dogmatisms about people being the best judges of their own interests. They are not. We're the best judges of their interests. We smart guys. We must therefore ensure that those idiots out there don't get into trouble, by actually using their theoretical right to vote to interfere where they don't belong, like in the public arena. So we got to keep them out of the public arena somehow and make sure that it's just us smart guys who are in there. Now, it's for their good, of course. It's kind of like you don't let, your 3-year-old, in my case, grandchild, run across the street, because she may want to run across the street, but it'd be improper to let her have that choice. And the same is true about the masses. They have to be controlled. They have to be controlled at the workplace. They have to be kept out of the political arena. They're not going to understand the need to protect the minority, the opulent against the majority. They're going to have all these strange leveling impulses, and they're going to do all kinds of things which will, mess the world up in all sorts of horrible ways. So for their benefit, we have to regiment their minds the way an army regiments their bodies, ensure that they're under control, make it very clear that they don't participate in workplace management, and certainly not in the political arena. They're to be outside somewhere. And the dedication with which this task has been pursued is pretty awesome. Just to take right after the fall of the House of Labor in the 1920s, when American labor really was smashed, and people were privatized and tried to accommodate individually to a most undemocratic America, as Montgomery and others have pointed out. That was a time when there was great awe about the end of history and the utopia of the masters, and it's all over, us good guys have won, everybody else is at our feet. Kind of like some of the stuff you read today. And it sort of looked like that. It's pretty much looked that way. Well, a few years later, as you know, the whole thing collapsed. And there was militant working class struggle and all sorts of other popular activism, and there had to be an accommodation. There had to be some kind of accommodation to these unwashed masses who were getting out of line, sit-down strikes and all sorts of things. And there was, indeed. There was this fragile social compact that Doug Fraser referred to was indeed established. It wasn't a gift, it was won by struggle. Meaning the labor laws and the limited social system. In fact, American workers back in the 1930s began to get the rights that had been standard long before, even in much more brutal society. You read the right-wing British press over the, say, early part of this century. They can't believe how bad American workers are treated. The same was true of visitors from Australia and so on. By the 1930s, the U.S. was sort of brought into the, more or less, the mainstream of industrial society on these matters, to a limited extent, in fact, but to some extent. That caused hysteria among the masters. You read the business press by 1936 or 37. Again, these are things which in a really free society, everybody would study in elementary school, because they're really important. These give the real framework of the society, in my view. They were talking about the hazard facing industrialists and the rising political power of the masses, and how we must do something to save ourselves or our way of life will be gone and we don't have a lot do it. They started right away. By the late 30s, there was a big anti-labor campaign that had built up. It's with new techniques, you know. There was still use of force, but it was understood that that's not going to work the way it did. So there was a shift to more propaganda, community organizing. The main idea, it's called the Mohawk Valley formula, I guess, so it was called something like that. Yeah, Mohawk Valley formula was designed by a lot of public relations hotshots around 36, 37, at the time of some of the steel strikes, to have a new, what they called scientific methods of strike breaking. We don't just come in, you know, with clubs and shoot people and smash their heads and that sort of thing. We do it the scientific way, because the old way doesn't work anymore. And the scientific methods of strike breaking were in fact drawn from the public relations ideas of the kind that I talked about. The main idea was to mobilize the community against the strikers and the union activists, to present a picture which is by now so standard you can hardly turn on the tube without seeing it, because it's just poured out in, you know, like streams ever since then. The basic idea is to present a picture of the world that looks kind of like this. There's us, you know, kind of big happy family in the community. You know, the honest workman going off every morning with his lunchbox, his loyal wife who's making the meals and taking care of the kids, the hardworking executive who's toiling day and night in the interests of you know, his workers in the community, the friendly banker who's running around looking for people to lend money to, and so on and so forth. That's us, you know. And we're all in harmony. Harmony is a big word. We're in harmony, we're all together. It's Americanism. You might take a look at that word Americanism. It's an unusual term. It's the kind of term that you only find in totalitarian societies, as far as I know. So like in the Soviet Union, anti-Sovietism was considered the gravest of all crimes, you know. And the Brazilian generals had some concept like that, anti-Brazilian. But try, say, publishing a book on anti-Italianism and see what happens in the streets of Rome or Milan. People won't even bother laughing. It's a ludicrous idea. The idea of Italianism or you know, Norwayism or something like that it's just the objects of ridicule in societies that have some kind of residue of a democratic culture inside people's heads. I don't mean in the formal system. But in totalitarian societies it is used, and as far as I know, the United States is the only free society that has such a concept. Maybe there's another one. If it is, you might try it in places you know. But anyhow, Americanism is an anti-Americanism and un-Americanism and so on. These are concepts which go along with harmony and getting rid of those outsiders and all that kind of stuff. Another part is simply to induce hatred and fear among people. So it's a diverse society. You know, you go to Europe, most places are pretty uniform. This is a very diverse society. So it's easy for propagandists. It's pretty easy to get people to, you know, hate the guy next door because it looks a little different or one thing or another. And huge campaigns go on to instigate divisions among people. I don't have to tell you about this. It's all so familiar to go on. But these are very natural techniques of social control.